Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to welcome you all to the Holistic Mental Health Summit, where we support you create a happy, fulfilling life that is free of anxiety and overwhelm. Our wonderful speaker today is Dr. Andrea Pennington, and she's going to talk to us about rediscovering your life purpose. Dr. Andrea is an integrative physician. She's an acupuncturist, a meditation teacher, and the #1 best-selling author of several books. So let's begin by asking Dr. Andrea about her own personal journey. How did you discover your life's purpose?
That's a great question. Well, I think I probably knew my life purpose as a child, but it got kind of covered up and pushed aside. Like so many other people, I ended up following what my mother told me and what my father told me and what the school system in America was telling me. But I think when I really look back as a child, the things that really lit me up, the things that I loved doing were teaching. I loved anything to do with the mind and spirituality. And so it isn't a surprise that I went to medical school. My mother is also a doctor. But even when I got out of medical school, I was already starting to incorporate other things. For example, I became trained in acupuncture and using acupuncture for trauma and drug and alcohol detox. So I just sort of naturally found my way to certain modalities that would put me back in that same position of teaching and dealing with the mind. And so now I truly believe I'm living my life purpose, which is teaching people how to reconnect to their true essence so that they can experience true vitality, resilience, happiness, and even personal fulfillment.
So for someone who's just starting out, for someone who's in the midst of maybe a change of professions because they don't feel fulfilled, for someone who's not satisfied with the way their life's shaping up, if they're facing some emotional issues and they just know it's not quite right, or they just know that what they're doing is temporary work, but it's not their life's calling, how would someone like that tap into their life's purpose? Is there a way, or is there a formula that they need to know to discover their own life's purpose?
Well, we love formulas, don't we? Well, I wish there really was like a magic formula. I have written about my 5-step process in my book, The Real Self-Love Handbook. And I do believe that there is a natural process, and it really starts with getting in touch with who you are and getting in touch with your true essence. So I would say if you're in a career that you don't really feel fits you, or it's no longer fulfilling, maybe you're just ready for a change, I would say go within and start to look at what you truly value in life. You know, what are the things that inspire you? What are the activities or the capabilities that you have that when you're doing those activities or when you're using those capabilities that you have, you feel like you get into that flow state. That's the state where we lose all track of time, we lose track of the ego, and we really feel like we're just one with the task. And if you can figure out what activities or which of your talents and strengths you use to get into that flow state, then you're probably going to get even closer to really connecting with your true self. And I really believe that when we know who we really are, not who we've been programmed to be, not the roles that we play as a mom or entrepreneur or a doctor or a daughter or a wife, when we really tune into what is my true essence, that's going to give you clues to what your purpose is right now. And it may be that your purpose before was operating as a nurse or a teacher or as a stay-at-home parent. But our purpose in life can shift. And if we tune in first to find out who we really are and what drives and motivates us, what are our natural strengths and traits and abilities, and then find ways to put them into practice, that's kind of the first couple of steps in the cornerstone process that I teach.
Wow. That's pretty interesting, because a lot of women or a lot of people all over the world, some of us just look at jobs as a means, right? A way to earning livelihood, but not a lot of women or people are empowered to look at jobs as a way of creative expression as well. Like, I love hosting these interviews. I love connecting with Ayurvedic community. I love sharing holistic, natural remedies, natural therapies, and my work itself is an extension of me. So I really feel fulfilled at the end of the day, and it's pretty amazing when you can live that life. But there are so many people who feel powerless, because of societal conditioning or parental conditioning, or only certain professions are kind of respected. As in my culture, being a doctor, that's was natural to me because that's what your parents want, that's what you want. But luckily I discovered Ayurveda, which was natural medicine, from the Indian continent. And it really changed my life. My own journey began as a patient, not as a doctor. So I'm very thankful for that. But sometimes people go through deep trauma, or they go through a lot of mental pressure, especially women bear lots of pressures. So how can someone reclaim their power over situations or over people who are kind of forcing them to make certain choices which they know they're not aligned with them or their life purpose?
Well, it goes back to that first step that I talked about, which is getting really tuned in and aware to who you really are. So if you were to ask yourself this question, who am I? Yes, we grew up with a lot of pressures to be that perfect daughter or perfect whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to die today, would you be dying with regret? Would you be dying with a sense of fulfilling your true purpose? Now, that I know is a little drastic, but sometimes that's the first real deep question that can inspire someone to say, enough. I'm tired of living for everyone else but me. Because when we get to the end of this life, that's it. We've locked in whatever karma, whatever actions we've taken, we can no longer make changes. But while we are still here, we can ask, who am I really? And even though in my case, I became a doctor, I opened up a wellness center, and I started doing documentary films with the Discovery Channel. And I had an incredible amount of success, and it was fun for a while. But I was starting to feel this desire for more, desire to really do more of the spiritual and natural remedies that weren't being talked about at that time on television. So I felt very blocked in my career, that I was very much in this box. And the things that were really speaking to me, I felt scared. Like maybe I'm going to be rejected by the medical community, or my family's going to think I'm nuts if I go and do something different. But I got to a point where I was so full of anxiety and depression that I didn't even want to get out of the house. I didn't even want my life to go on. And so for some of us, we do have to get to that point of pain where we finally say, I can't keep living someone else's dream. And so if you're in that spot and you can start to go within and say, okay, if I were to die today, would I have regret? And think about, how much happier would your family be, and even your children, if they knew you were living your truth? Because living a lie and living for other people and being so codependent that you do nothing for yourself is only teaching the people around you how to keep treating you and how they treat themselves. And one of the things that really motivated me was when I became pregnant with my daughter. And I knew that if I kept doing this one-dimensional career with TV and only sharing a part of me and not all of me, then what would I be teaching her? That it's okay to just get in a box and pretend and not live your truth? That was unacceptable for me. And so you kind of have to figure out, what is that line that you're not going to cross? And for me, that's what it was. It was like, I have to live authentically. And yes, there were times that my family did think I was crazy. I ended up leaving my TV career, closing down my medical practice. I ended up moving to the south of France, which is where I'm speaking to you from today.
Wow.
And there was a period of time when people thought I was crazy. But following my heart and living authentically has been the greatest gift to me. And now I can see in my daughter, she's now 13, I can see that the impact it's had on her is allowing her to live authentically and not feel trapped by gender or identity or race or culture. And for me, again, it was that pain of feeling like I just couldn't go on that way. So It can be scary, but one of the things that we've done since I've moved here and I've started talking about self-love and living your true purpose is we've started a global community. It's the Real Self-Love community. We offer it completely free so that you're not alone anymore. You can connect with other people who are like you, who are also committed to getting free from those traumatic influences, loving yourself, and then living as your authentic self.
That is so powerful. That is really powerful because nobody talks about living their truth, right? Or nobody discusses certain things. We just earn a living or we do jobs, and very few of us, the more I talk to women, the more I realize that there's so many expectations. But especially when you have children, you have to make sure that you're actually role modeling the behavior. So you're actually living your truth if you want your children to live the truth as well. So that was like one of the biggest powerful things you've shared today. And the other point I would like to love you to elaborate is you talked about a lot of pain, anxiety, depression. So can sometimes anxiety or depression be a sign that you're not living your truth? Or is it more about um, uh, neurotransmitter disorder, because that's what the modern medicine talks about, right? There's something wrong with you neurologically. You're not secreting enough serotonin, or there's not enough dopamine. You're not getting that joy because you don't have enough hormones or neurotransmitters in your system. But what if that's not the problem? So what are your thoughts on using pain or anxiety, depression, and reclaiming your life?
Yes, I really do believe that anxiety and depression are just symptoms of deeper problems. And many times they are symptoms of trauma, disconnection from your true self, and literally hating oneself. And I've been a physician for over 20 years. And when I went to medical school, that what you just described was the belief of the day. We believed that depression could be transmitted in families, and it was a neurotransmitter or a brain problem, and that if you had it, you're probably going to be stuck with it for life. Now, I suffered with depression for more than 20 years, from my teen years up until my mid 30s. And I thought I was stuck with it. So I tried everything. I tried the antidepressants. I tried amino acid therapy. I did everything, exercise to get my dopamine up, sunlight, and I did, of course, psychotherapy as well. And when I started my medical practice and I started treating alcoholism, addiction, and eating disorders, I got a whole new understanding of how depression and anxiety can be caused by early childhood experiences. So they could be terrible traumas like abuse or sexual assault, but sometimes they're basic adverse childhood experiences. There's a complete study out there, several studies called ACE, the adverse childhood experiences. And so it's not just whether you were beaten or you were abused, but if you were in a family who experienced divorce or moved several times, if a family member was sick, if you felt like you weren't loved, these are things that actually impact our developing brain. So as a child, you may have had these experiences or witnessed things that impacted the way your brain developed as a result of the stress and the trauma. And then later on in life, what we're seeing is symptoms like depression and anxiety, and even other things. It impacts the immune system. So we see people developing autoimmune conditions and allergies and accelerated brain deterioration like dementia. So we're in an era right now where physicians like myself and like you are recognizing that we have to look at these quote unquote diseases with a new understanding. And I think when you do recognize that when you're not living and expressing your truth, when you're not feeling like you're worth anything on this planet, then of course you're going to feel depressed. If you're being forced to keep going in a job or a relationship or something that isn't fully aligned with who you are and what you desire in life, of course you're going to feel anxious every time you have to get up and do those things. So it may not be the case for everyone. Certainly there's situational depression when you lose a job or you lose a loved one. But if you're finding that it's part of this ongoing pattern of your life, it's worth investigating.
And that's really interesting because ACE or adverse childhood events are not really talked about. And I have known so many people who are also high performers or overachievers or born to overachieving parents, right? And I think I can relate that with you because I'm meeting you for the first time, but I think I grew up the same way to overachieving parents. And there's always the part of you which wants to excel everything. You're extremely competitive and you reach many mountains and put your flag, but you're never satisfied. You're never really happy. So you just go on achieving one mountain to the other. And that's a comment somebody made for me that, like you have so much, like, what are you still pushing for? And why aren't you feeling happy? So that's when I started doing my own inner work. So sometimes, childhood events need not be very traumatic. It could be something like a parent with some emotional issues or divorce, or it might not be something as extreme as abuse, but it's definitely something you need to kind of look inwards and figure out. So is there something you suggest for somebody who's recovering from childhood trauma or ACE?
Well, the first thing is to just become aware of it. Now, there are many of these free assessments on the internet where you can go and find out how many ACEs or what is your ACE score. And again, just like you pointed out, it's not always these terrible, terrible traumas. But if just knowing your ACE score and knowing that if you have a high score, and it's only like 10 questions, it puts you at risk for several health challenges and several difficulties in life. And if you just know that, it can, if you allow it, it can give you so much relief and allow you to step into compassion, because it's not your fault. And oftentimes it's not even the adult's fault that you grew up with. They were under the same faulty programming that led them to raise us in the way that they did. And so if you just know that maybe some of the challenges you're facing, whether they're emotional or physical health challenges, and that they are as a result of the way you grew up, you can start to step into compassion and forgiveness. And as soon as we can do that, that allows us to step into acceptance, accepting that you are the way you are without any guilt or shame or judgment. Because ultimately, you can't really love yourself. You can't live as your authentic self if you don't accept yourself. If you're still dealing with this shame and this guilt and rejection of who you really are, it's very difficult. So we have published at realself.love a way for you to get the ACE questionnaire and just take the free test and find out how high your score is.
Yeah, so everyone who's listening, just take the test today and see what your score is, and that'll really help you get on track with starting your own healing journey, right? And we talk about acceptance, like this was beautiful because acceptance is the cornerstone to true happiness or true joy, or that blissful state where you're happy every day and not suffering. So is there something that women should know about true happiness? Or, sometimes we look at a lot of issues like emotional eating, where women try to derive some happiness out of food, or addictions are a good way where it's more external happiness that you're trying to chase, which is not really happiness, right? So how do you know that when you're looking for happiness, how do you know if it's true or not?
Well, one of the things that I share in the book is what has been scientifically proven to get us to that stage of true self-acceptance. Again, I don't think that you can experience true happiness if you hate yourself. I was in that state. And it's just like what you described. I was an overachiever. I had built the business. I had been on Oprah. I had all the money. I had all the stuff, the degrees and everything. And I wasn't happy. And in fact, I was really feeling a lot of self-loathing. And I couldn't experience true happiness until I could accept myself. And so there's been wonderful research that has been done in the world of positive psychology. And in particular, Ellen Langer's lab really looked at what does it take to get to unconditional self-acceptance. And there are actually 3 keys. The first one is mindfulness, living mindfully, where you're literally tuned into this present moment without judgment. So many of us are still living based on past programming, where we're judging ourselves, or we have an internal critic that's always judging us. But that's based on the past. That's based on who you were forced to become as a result of your childhood. So mindfulness is about tuning in and becoming this aware, present witness to what's going on right now in this context and dropping the judgment. The second key to really getting to this state of true happiness and total self-acceptance is compassion. And compassion, you know, there's so much beautiful research going on with Kristen Neff and all these other researchers that shows that if we really take a self-compassion attitude, what that means is it means that we recognize that we are human, just like all the other humans. And as a human, we are going to have that little voice in the head. We're going to be self-judgmental. That's part of what it is when we decided to come into this human form. We have this ego. But as soon as you can recognize that I'm just like everyone else is striving for happiness. Everyone else is challenged with fear and judgment and blame and trying to live up to parents' expectations. And as soon as you can recognize that we have this shared humanity, you're much more likely to give yourself a break and stop beating yourself up. Stop judging and criticizing yourself, and instead say, wow, I'm really having a tough time with this. And I pray that I can get through this with less suffering. And then the third key to really experiencing that true happiness and total self-acceptance is little by little, ant step by ant step, living as your authentic self. And so rather than being in this codependent dance where you're checking to see what everyone else needs and forgetting your own boundaries and your own self-care and doing for others, this is where you say, what are my authentic needs? What are my true desires? What do I really want to express? And start doing that. It doesn't have to be radical where you change everything. It can really be just an ant step out of your comfort zone as your authentic self, because then you start to get feedback that, okay, you're not going to die, right? Because most of us, we didn't become codependent and taking care of other people as our nature. No, we learned that. And we needed that maybe to fit in with our peer groups or with our family so that we didn't get in trouble or we didn't get, you know, in the worst case, beaten. Mm-hmm. So as an adult, it may be that you can only take little tiny steps out of your comfort zone just to verify that you're not going to get killed, that you're not going to be completely rejected by everyone in society. You may find that some of your parents or your friends and family don't like it because they liked it when you did everything that they wanted. They liked it when you were, you know, sucking up and always doing, letting them choose. Yeah. But little by little, if you can start to live as your authentic self, following your true voice, you will get to that place of self-acceptance. And that's what leads to true happiness.
That's so beautiful. So mindfulness is the first step. The second one was compassion. And the third one is living as your authentic self, no matter how hard it is or how challenging it seems. But just, I usually say baby steps. I'm kind of hearing ant steps for the first time, but that's really the key, you know, just getting out of your comfort zone little by little, just making one positive change at a time is really important. So when it comes to trauma healing and accepting more self-love, you know, because sometimes certain events happen in life where you completely lose your power, or you give so much more power to somebody else's words, or there's some kind of emotional abuse that you start believing all the lies they tell you, right? Mm-hmm. And it's extremely hard in the cases to kind of embrace self-love. And I know you're the expert because you've written your book on real self-love. So how does somebody who's going through extreme traumatic events start their self-love journey?
Well, I would say for most of us, we do need a therapist or a coach to be in this healthy relationship. The challenge with trauma is not that we've experienced bad things. Bad things are going to happen in life. The challenge with most of us that experience trauma, particularly early in life, is that we didn't have a responsible, compassionate adult to help us process the trauma, to help us feel safe again, to help us recognize it wasn't our fault. We're not bad people just because bad things happened. And so for many of us, we do need to be in a therapeutic relationship with a coach or a healer. And that could be an Ayurvedic doctor, that could be an acupuncturist, it could be a psychotherapist. We've put everything into this book, the Real Self-Love Handbook, all of the exercises that we do in clinical practice that you can do on your own. But if you're finding that the trauma is triggering you, then it's advisable to reach out and get some therapeutic help.
Okay, so you're advising to start with establishing like a therapeutic relationship with a practitioner would be like one of the first steps, like seeking help from a professional when sometimes it's really a big challenge or a big struggle.
Yes.
And are there any ways to integrate different parts of yourself to find true happiness? Because sometimes, we talk about our shadow selves, or some people are just naturally very angry, or they're naturally very reactive, or, so a lot of the times as women, we are very critical of ourselves, and there are so many parts of our own selves that we're not happy with, right? And a lot of the times, radical self-acceptance comes with accepting all parts of us and integrating all parts of us. So is there a process, or what are your thoughts on it?
Yes, I wrote about this in the book as well. I was really impressed at university when I first got exposed to Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who wrote a lot about archetypes and the shadow. And this idea that there are parts of ourselves that we've disowned, that we've hidden, that we've rejected, that really resonated for me because I had this artistic part of me. I have my singer inside of me. I have my little, creative explorer. And there were times in my life that I was told that those were not acceptable, that they weren't a viable option for a lifelong career, and that expressing myself artistically just meant that I wasn't serious. And so there were parts of my personality that I just kind of hid, and I literally felt bad anytime they were coming up. And that's what led to the self-hatred, the self-loathing that I experienced in my mid-30s. And so one of the things that Carl Jung and other therapists have said is that if we really want to feel like we are whole, that we are happy, and we are competent, we do need to integrate all parts of ourselves. And that includes the parts in the shadow. And so I would invite anyone who's dealing with it to explore doing shadow work by looking at the parts of yourself that you do judge. If you do have that little judgmental, critical voice inside, start to identify, where did that come from? We're not born with them. We're not born with that internal mean voice. It was programmed into us. Maybe we brought it inside of us after hearing an older sibling or a coach or maybe a bully, or it could have been a parent. But when you start to trace back to that, find out which part of yourself did you have to shut down. That judgmental voice is judging a part of you. And the first thing is just shining light on your shadow, and then seeing if you can offer some compassion to that part of you that's been wounded and shoved away.
Oh, that's really an interesting perspective, because a lot of the times, we have either our parents' voice in our head, like your mom saying certain things or your spouse saying certain things, but then there's also the part of you which is not their voice, but it's your own self-critical voice, right? So understanding that and working with your shadow self is really an important piece of integrating all parts of you. And then I also wanted to ask you about, how do you tune into your gifts, for personal and professional growth? Because you mentioned you have a lot of gifts as singer or a creative person, and even your career now, though you've changed what you do, and you have much more success. And I know it's not easy, right, for somebody who's already that successful, who's already well known in the community, well known internationally, for them to take a leap of faith and change their careers, or change their where they're living, or change their brand. It becomes extremely challenging because you're known for a certain thing, and then you have to try and develop another thing. So how did you tune into your gifts and use them for personal and professional growth? Or how can somebody really tap into your own gifts and use them for personal and professional growth?
Well, it all comes back to connecting with your authentic self. And the best way to connect with yourself is through introspection. That can be asking yourself questions and then journaling. That can be sitting in meditation or prayer or contemplation. That is probably the number one way that I've been able to really get in touch with me, the real me. Of course, when we first start to meditate, the voices are so loud, our thoughts are so noisy. But the more time that you spend, and again, that could be with a mantra or asking a question and then taking it into meditation. For me, my gifts or my talents, they speak to me. They speak through my body. I get these, urges to do something. Just like you would have an urge to drink some water because you're really thirsty. If you start tuning into your body and your mind, it will communicate with you in different ways. And so I highly recommend that you start a meditation practice and then journaling, just writing whatever comes to you. And little by little, you'll develop more faith and more confidence that the voice that is probably much more silent and much more loving than the voices you usually hear, that's your authentic self. That's the part of you that is your true essence, that's still tied to the divine, and that has these natural gifts and interests that your real self wants to explore in this lifetime. So getting into that introspective space, spending time in meditation, contemplation, and journaling is what I'd recommend.
So we've shared a lot today about reclaiming your mental and emotional, well-being. So if it was just one step that's absolutely your favorite, whether it's mindfulness or journaling or owning your creative expressions. So what's the one thing that you absolutely love and that you would recommend for everybody?
Meditation.
Meditation.
Meditation. The more that we can connect with our true self, the more that all of the other things fall into place. Becoming conscious and aware of who you really are through meditation is the way.
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for being with us for the interview, and all our listeners, please buy this amazing book. It sounds really awesome, and I'm going to purchase a book for myself, and I'm really interested to see your 5-step process that you've used in your clinical practice and try it on my clients and patients as well. I'm definitely going to do that. For everyone listening, if you're loving the summit, you can have all these interviews in your library. Please check out the upgrade package below. And you'll love to have all these interviews along with certain bonuses at your finger clicks. Okay, thank you so much. And we will talk to you soon. Namaste.
Namaste.